Lots of attention on Libya, and we know there's a rebel national council that's basically trying to set up a government counteracting that of Colonel Gaddafi. Are investors watching that situation closely?
Yes, Loretta, good evening. I think that the situation is very fluid at the moment. I think most governments, I think the huddling of 40 nations in London are excluding the Libyan sort of revolutionaries, demonstrates that everyone is trying to find a quick end to the military intervention sanctioned by the UN Security Council 1973. I think the other problem is that no one is really au fait with who are the rebels. What is their motivation besides Gaddafi? And I think these issues will continue to influence the momentum behind movements, initiatives taken overnight. President Obama was quite explicit last night, trying to reassure the American people on America's position. And between that report and me walking in here, we hear that the United States has appointed an emissary to facilitate conversation.
Let's talk about America's intervention in Libya, because we know that there's this whole no-fly zone and how it's being monitored. The inaugural mission by AFRICOM, what's that all about from the US perspective?
Yeah, I think that we must understand that the mandate of the no-fly zone came from the UN Security Council, initiated by the Arab League. The United States and other countries who subscribed to that initiative decided to form this coalition and begin to restrict the Gaddafi regime's move towards the east, towards Benghazi. AFRICOM, which was founded a few years ago, based in Liberia, is part of the architecture of the United States on military presence in strategic geographical territories or zones, and they have engaged. The irony of the situation is that around AFRICOM, it was the Maghreb Arabic nations which were more optimistic and supporting the establishment, and less so the sub-Saharan African states.
I mean, obviously, prior to the crisis in the Middle East and North Africa, America's been preoccupied with its own national security issues and anti-terror expeditions, for lack of a better word, across the globe. Is that still a priority for America as it deals with Africa, or is containing the crisis in North Africa foremost of mind?
Yeah, I think this is an indictment on the whole process of diplomacy. I think when we resort to the Security Council, and during 2011, for example, the Security Council has issued 8 resolutions, of which 6 dealt with Africa. And when you resort to the Security Council, that is almost of last resort when diplomacy has failed. And I think that there are very few countries around the world that want to find themselves drawn into a protracted military intervention in any part of the world. And I think what is happening now in London is a demonstration that, let's broaden this coalition and let's find a solution as soon as possible, because we don't know what we've got ourselves into.
Talk to us about the geopolitics of oil, because some are saying this concerted effort from NATO, the United States, the UN, has a lot to do with Libya being an oil producer. Were Libya not an oil producer, you probably wouldn't see this concert of activity from leading countries. Is AFRICOM and some of these efforts an attempt by America to try to regain control of energy assets?
I doubt that. I think it plays out very well in the media. I think the supply side on strategic mineral like oil, there are sufficient suppliers, including Russia, who are taking advantage of the situation. I think that it is probably too simplistic for us, and I think commentary, because the situation is moving so fast, attracts us to formulate positions like this. But it is clear from President Obama's statement yesterday that what he's looking at is getting out of it as soon as possible and deferring it not within the AFRICOM sort of complex, but within the NATO complex. And as you probably have seen the most recent wire that NATO will only take over on Thursday at 1800 hours GMT.
Now, obviously the crisis in North Africa has had a bearing on Africa to the extent that people see the continent as a high-risk continent to invest in, and we've seen a sell-off of African bonds in response to this risk aversion sentiment. Going forward, how can the rest of sub-Saharan Africa counteract this negativity in terms of perceptions, and what sort of things should we be doing to boost our advantages with countries like the United States and others that are prospective investors on the continent?
Yes. We live with political risk every day.
Yeah.
Our political risk is not synonymous of Africa. There's political risk in the United States. There's political risk in Europe. What is happening now with Portugal, and soon after what had happened in Greece. I think that, let me probably use an example of a South African firm, MTN Group, performed very well today on the big board. South Africa has, MTN has investments in Syria, has investments in Yemen, has investments in Iran. And yet what we see is that the MTN stock is trading at a premium. And Iran has displaced South Africa as the number 2 within the portfolio. So political risk managed properly, being able to anticipate it and engage and influence the trajectory that it could take, is one thing that I think many boardrooms are dealing with every day.